To begin, if everyone can take their seats, thank you. Good morning, my name again is Amanda Rivera. I'm the hearing examiner that's presiding over this case. The date is September 6th, 2024, and this is case DCI 2022-00067. This is our second day in the Cary+Duke+Povia RPD. We are in the middle of public comment, so that is where we will resume. Just as a reminder, there is only one opportunity to speak, so if I call your name but you've previously spoken, please just indicate that, and I can move on to the next speaker. I did administer the oath on Wednesday, but in an abundance of caution, I'm going to do so again. So if you intend to speak, if you can please raise your hand. Do you swear or affirm the testimony you'll provide is the truth? Okay, thank you. So the first card that I have is for, let's see, these are the order that we need to do. Okay. The first one is for Catherine Sanderford. Good morning.
Morning. Is this on?
Yes.
Do I need to do anything with it?
No.
Okay. All right. Oh, I won't. Thank you. Yes, my name is Kathy Sanderford. I am too very proud to be a part of the Alba community.
I'm sorry, I don't want to interrupt you, ma'am. I'm so sorry. Dirk, could we please pull up the aerial?
Yeah.
Just so
I
we
was going to
have
you do that. I'm sorry. But is that the common page?
Yeah, let's see. I think it's still in here. Yeah, it looks like it. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. And if you could indicate just generally where you live in vicinity to the project.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank
Yes,
you.
ma'am. But again, I'm Kathy, like you mentioned. I'm very proud to be here to represent Alba community. We are a strong and passionate people that want to keep the landscape the way it is as much as we can. And I live at 18930 Saranoa Court, which is right in the middle of the three clusters. And the biggest cluster is right behind my property. Okay. I'm going to go back to 1992 when my husband and I were deciding where to live. We lived in Lehigh. Our kids were small and we wanted to have acreage. So we looked around, we prayed about it, we drove around, and we discovered North River Oaks, which is Saranoa Court. Each of the properties there's 12 properties, they're each about 5.5 to 6 acres. And we loved it. We thought, wow, I can't believe we found this. So we raised our boys there. We had events there. We entertain a lot. We share our property with many species of animals, especially the tortoise, snakes, alligators, so forth. And we don't mind, that's their home. I feel like that's where they were there before I got there. It's been a lot of fun. Even better yet, in the back of our property, when you look in the pasture land, you see cows. And I can't imagine the clustering or the density that I'm going to see. It's scary in a way because when you increase density, you increase crime. And I don't remember anyone mentioning that, but that is something that you have to think about when you have hundreds of people in the back of your property, when you didn't have that before. So yeah, fast forward to today, the development they're saying now is going to be 30-foot lots. That is just, that's the size of my garage. And I'm in awe of that. Ideally, one house like mine in that area should be 1 per 5 acres to keep the country landscape. Because when you think of density, the crowdiness, the homes that look like, well, they're duplexes basically. They're not a country look. And that's a horrible thought. My friend mentioned that my husband has been water skiing for, 31 years from our home. He goes to the river. I'm not sure he's going to be able to do that anymore with the traffic increase. And you know, they mentioned about the difference in the morning and afternoon traffic numbers. That's not going to be that. You know, if you think about the trucks that are going to be going in there, relatives, friends, that's going to look like more like 5 times that. Because just on Wednesday, I went to Babcock, and someone said, don't get on the road on 31 because there's the wreck. Okay, so I had to wait. I thought, all right, so it was a truck and a small car, and that happens quite often. So that's right now. I can't even imagine what the season's going to look like, and I can't imagine at all what it's going to look like 3 to 5 years from now. Okay, I mean, I love people, and I'm not saying I don't, but when you think about the density, you're thinking about more noise, like I said before, more crime, and when you think about that, the density factor, how is that going to affect my landscape? How is that going to affect my water flow? Because we do, you know, flows to the Trout Creek. How's that going to affect that? It probably will. So that's very hard to grasp. Okay. And also I think I heard like 300 to 400 feet behind my property line. Then I heard, oh, no, that could be less than 100. So we're talking about how are they going to do that? I know they're probably going to put a burn. Okay, that's just a little bit of land that's been, you know, turned into like a little mound, or not a mound, but they cut it down. So, you know, we're talking, you know, anyone could walk over to my property if they really wanted to. And I've just got a couple of things, maybe 3 things, from a journal. It talks about the negative implications of higher density, like noise, overcrowding, lack of green spaces. I know you talk about green spaces, but I'm talking about that's not that much when you consider the big picture of the country that we live in. Limited privacy, the well-being. It does affect the well-being and satisfaction with their living environment. The rapid growth, especially in the form of high-density housing, has resulted in many, this is from a journal I read from, high-density housing has resulted in many negatives, crowded schools, congested traffic, strained infrastructure, rationed national resources such as water, loss of open space and farmland, increased pollution, packed recreation sites, and increased concerns of safety. And that's crime. Increasing density in a residential neighborhood increases crime. Again, I said that. Increased density increases transience and turnover of residents in a neighborhood. Neighbors know a lesser percentage of people in the neighborhood when they don't stay long. Most of the people on Wednesday, as of myself, I've been at my home for 31 years, we don't come and go. But when you have high-density small homes, you see people come and go. That's like my son's neighborhood. They come and go. Increasing density increases, long-term homeowners are more protective of their neighborhood and the homes around them than are short-term. Well, that's kind of repeating, but this is what I really love. No single answer will be the perfect solution for every community. As long as our population and needs continue to grow, we will all face tough questions about how we build and maintain our communities. It will be up to every rural community to discern if commercial development is right for their town. Every rural community could be faced with encroaching commercial development at any moment, and preparing for those conversations is the right solution, and that's what we're doing right now. So I guess in summary, low density, 1 home per 5 acres. Safety, that's traffic, that's crime. we have to remember that we have to make it less difficult for our emergency management, including fire trucks and so forth. So I was thinking about this. Excuse me. I'm older than I was when I moved in. That's granted. Okay. So, excuse me. What's going to happen if something emergent occurred in my home? Like my husband had a heart attack or I had a heart attack. Can we be certain that the emergency management, EMS, fire trucks, whatever, can get to us on time? That's a scary thought. That is a very scary thought. And I'm a nurse, and I know the window of time that you have in a situation like that you have to have those people at your house or wherever you are. I was thinking, well, maybe I have to get an AED, and it's probably true. I probably will. So please consider these things I've mentioned, okay, because they're very important, especially the traffic right now. I mean, we're not even in season, and my word, it took me over an hour to get here, and it used to take me about 20 minutes. So I appreciate your time and hearing me, and again, we need to keep our rural home rural.
Thank you. Thank you for coming today, ma'am. The next card I have is Richard Sanderford. Did he wish to speak? Okay. Okay, Jimmy Cochran.
Where is it?
Good morning.
Good morning. I'm Jim Jackson. I'm a small landowner and a large taxpayer. I have property in Alva. My main concern is I think it would be irresponsible to put more traffic on the roads until the roads are built and widened and the bridges widened. I think we would be responsible for more families to be injured and killed, and I don't think we want that. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you for coming today, sir. The next card I have is for Frida Cochran.
My name is Frida Cochran, and I live at 17651 Cypress Creek in Alva. The traffic is so unmanageable right now. And when you put all these homes at 30 feet with 2 cars per home probably, I don't know what you're thinking. I just don't know how that is even realistic. And so it's kind of like imperative that you do the roads, get the roads ready for such a influx. And from my understanding, there's nothing planned for road improvement for several years. Now, that is just a recipe for disaster.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming today, ma'am. The next card I have is Linda Redfern. Good morning.
Good morning. My name is Linda Redfern, and I'm a surrounding property owner and live approximately 300 feet from the southeast boundary of the subject property. Otter Creek, which was mentioned yesterday, flows diagonally through my property, and I and others am very concerned about what this project will do to the future health of this flowway into the Caloosahatchee River, and flooding continues to remain a concern because of this. I oppose a zoning change for a density increase. We are a rural community. I see nothing that would or should compel this county commission to grant a free density increase on this property. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Thank you for coming. The next card I have is Holly Schwartz. Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you for hearing us today, Madam Hearing Examiner. 17520 Oak Creek Road. I would like to make a few comments about the new Rare and Unique Uplands Density Policy. It's an incentive density policy. While we appreciate land being preserved and restored, it comes at quite a cost to the rural community. In this case, it comes with the reward to the developer of almost 43% more density than the current base density allows. Unfortunately, this incentive also supports urban sprawl into rural areas that are supposed to be protected from urban density, and therefore inconsistent with our interpretation of the Northeast Lee County Planning Community Guidelines and the principles of the North Olga Community Plan. Some of the environmental enhancements of this new policy will be offset by the very large density increases, including increased nutrient pollution and more impervious surfaces. This may be an argument for another day, but we all know that what is approved here will be approved next door to that, and then what's next door to that. So what we aren't considering here at all is the cumulative impact of these individual zoning cases and what that will do to our remaining rural community in terms of traffic increases, impacts to our disappearing wildlife, and to the continuing downward trends in impaired water quality. I very much appreciate staff's time. They spent a lot of time with us explaining some of these pretty confusing requirements. But the requirements of the Rare and Unique Upland Restoration Policy, however, are being involved. But let me back up a little bit. Being involved in many of these zoning cases in our community, we've kind of had to educate ourselves on these new policies, and this real point of frustration is that what's approved and negotiated here sometimes changes pretty significantly from the time that the board approves it to the DO phase. And so I'm going to respectfully ask for a condition that if there are substantive changes made after the vote to approve the zoning, that another public hearing be scheduled so that the public has the ability to be aware, be informed, and give their input. And I don't mean just changes to the density. We get that there's going to be another public hearing if density changes, but I mean changes to setbacks, changes to environmental restoration timelines or requirements. Some of the other smaller conditions that I hope would be considered would be to implement dark skies principles, which would entail using less than maximum lumens allowed by code, as maximum lumens lead to sky glow and harm to surrounding wildlife. Another example of wildlife-friendly condition would be if there's going to be internal street curbing, to use slanted curbing rather than just perpendicular vertical curbing, curbing that catches small amphibians and reptiles, leading to car strikes. We've all seen our share of heartbreaking roadkill, and there will be many more. And since we're spending so many resources on creating this rare and unique habitat, it would only be proper to give these animals a chance to survive. So I have a couple of examples of international dark sky principles and the recommended lumens, and examples of curbing for your review and consideration. I'll give that to your staff. And as for questions, you said we were allowed to ask a couple of questions. So all of the environmental restoration and water quality monitoring reports required at the DO phase and beyond, I'm wondering if those will be posted on the county website or otherwise available to the public, or will we have to do a public records request for those documents? First question. Second question, on Wednesday in the 48-hour letter discussion, the applicant showed some renderings on the ground cover between the development and Duke Highway. One of the slides said that there would be a 100% opaque coverage, but according to the rare and unique restoration policy, they only have to meet an 80% survivability rate. So I'm curious about whether it's 100% or 80% or what the requirements are there. And then finally, in support of some of the concerns expressed on Wednesday regarding the inadequacy of the available utilities infrastructure, we would like to submit some additional information regarding the Fort Myers Central Sewer Plant and a recent July 18th DEP warning letter outlining some of the compliance issues of this plant. So this is, we're not making this up, we're just taking this from a DEP compliance letter that was dated July 18th. So the facility has a toxicity exceedance. The facility has had chronic effluent exceedances. The facility exceeded technical review criteria for total nitrogen and total phosphorus. There have been multiple groundwater exceedances. The facility has chronic raw water spills. So, I mean, I won't go into the whole thing, but I will enter this into the record so that you have the opportunity to look and decide whether this kind of density is appropriate. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. She'll hand it to you. Thank you. The next speaker is James Kennedy. Good morning.
Good morning. Thanks for letting me speak. We switch over PowerPoints here real quick. Before I screw your stuff up.
No, it's all good. Sorry about that. Let's see here. There's a lot of things open now. Okay, do you remember which one was yours?
So actually the middle, yeah, the PowerPoint.
Okay, doke. There you go.
Okay. First of all, I'd like to introduce myself. My name is James Kennedy. I am the president of a fairly newly formed nonprofit, the East Lee Wildlife Stewardship Group. Our group was formed in response to the immense pressures that are being placed on our native wildlife, especially the gap in enforcement, local enforcement between the state and local laws. And we have been called upon by numerous citizens to help with tortoise-related issues, with other wildlife-related issues. Just in our short existence, we were actually spurred into existence by a developer clearing and entombing, which is no longer legal, gopher tortoises. Not casting that aspersion on communities either. It's just a fact in our existence. I'm also a lifetime resident of Alva. I'm a member of the Board of Trustees for the Alva Museum. I am a partner in the Roar Eastleigh News, which is a paper that serves the area. And as far as my experience with gopher tortoises, my first science project was when I was in the 7th grade, and that's been a few years ago. And I did 4 projects. All 3 were fairly successful, and one of them actually went to international. So that was the start of my amateur interest in gopher tortoises. So I've been doing this for quite a few years, and I've spoke at the Gopher Tortoise Council meeting. I've been to the annual meetings some time ago because I did have a professional life that had me leaving the area a lot. I've spent 26 years in the Navy, so this has always been home. I've always been very involved in what's going on, but I have had a chance to refocus my efforts. My grandparents, I'm one of those long-term multi-generationals. I actually hate to bring that stuff up, but since we're all doing it, my grandparents were born on Pearl Street and Goggin Street, or Goggin Road in Alva. My great-grandparents got there before the turn of the century, so I have a lot in the ground in the area. I've been able to speak for people that can't always speak at these, whether they have professional limitations that prevent them or they're just not able to. So when I talk about this stuff, it's not just my point of view, it's my experience, it's my lived experience, it's everything else, and my actual interaction with the stuff that I'm talking about. Before I get into my actual presentation, there's just a few points that coming over from Wednesday that I wanted to touch on. First and foremost, I agree with the community members that have spoken out in opposition to this, and again would like to note that the very small minority of the voices in support have interests tied to the project. This project will only benefit those with financial interests and will be of significant detriment to the community. The authors of this project, not living in the community, will not suffer the consequences. And that's a theme that's recurrent throughout many of the developments in the county. The applicants stated during their presentation, they were talking about the wetlands that you have to preserve. They used air quotes. That's not a fact for or against. It's just odd that you have to use air quotes to discuss preserving wetlands. The applicant the planner called this development a proper new town. I'm not a professional planner. I'm not an expert in planning. But when an expert planner once again demonstrates a lack of respect, consideration, and understanding for the region of the county they want to shoehorn this into, it's concerning. This is not compatible with the plan, and it's not compatible with the area. The letter of intent or the LEAP plan and the Alva community plans. Correct, excuse me. It's not compatible with the letter or the intent of the LEAP plan, the North Olga, or the Alva community plans. Not to call them out, but at the first meeting that I went to when I became aware of this, and they came in and they tried to, again, basically what they did here, tried to explain how wonderful and beautiful that this thing was going to be. He had so little understanding of what rural communities are and what they're supposed to be and what we're supposed to be preserving that he didn't even know what the FFA was when he was asked at the first meeting. Again, I don't want to call the specific individual out, but I kind of wonder if he knows what FFA is now, since they're still trying to shoehorn the same type of development into the area. It's been repeated multiple times that this prevents 788 homes on septic. Again, I'm not an expert planner, but I can read, and that doesn't really math either, because not all of the property would be buildable. Anything built on Mount Povia is highly susceptible to extreme settling events. There are other homes in the area that are built on the same type of river spoils One of them sunk almost a foot. It's right down the road. I'm sure that they would be willing to show you if you actually wanted to see it. This development's obviously incompatible with the area and the expected development slope, because if it was, they wouldn't have to hide it behind a 20-foot berm and heavy tree cover. And I'm going to come back to the tree cover later. They said the preservation areas are not they said the preservation areas are ironclad. Well, Bradenton's experience with Neal communities would indicate otherwise. Or in light of the FDEP plan to put golf courses in our state parks, state experience would be otherwise. In Bradenton at State Road 64 and Dam Street, once they broke ground on the project, additional units were requested.
Madam Hearing, I'm going to object to this testimony at this time. What occurs in Bradenton under Bradenton's rules has nothing to do with the proceedings here.
If you could limit your comments to the request that's here in Lee County, I would appreciate that. Thank you.
Sure, I would. I just think that it speaks to a pattern of behavior. Let's see. How does one, okay, well, this does directly affect the project here. So again, not a planner, not a transportation guy, but math seems pretty simple. It doesn't make sense that a two-family home results in reduced trip counts. If one family makes one trip at a minimum per day, wouldn't two families at least double that? So the trip math doesn't work. Preserve areas. All right, so this is another one where, again, lay testimony, not professional. Signs and fencing for the preservation areas. First of all, tortoises can't read. Two, fences fragment, or any fence that prevents or protects a tortoise from going into where they're not supposed to serves to fragment habitat and impede corridors. This is something else I'm going to loop back around to. But the minimum barrier is the minimum barrier that they use to keep wildlife out of construction areas is basically a silt barrier, stakes, and a cloth barrier. If you look at the picture of the opening of my brief PowerPoint, that little rear end scooting through the construction area, that's a gopher tortoise trying to find his home. It's probably under the bulldozer. I can't really surmise. I don't want to say something that's not relevant. We talk about aesthetics. Which plants are going to be used and how are you, so my question is, which plants are you going to use and how are you calculating the mix? You know, how much is going to be wiregrass? How much is going to be Florida pusley? You know, these are all important questions, because then you talk about your canopy density. Tortoises actually do really well in previously disturbed but established areas, groves, pastures, yards, roadsides, as long as they're not hit by a car, that is. They like lawns. That's kind of, you know, and they like pastures. Grass for them, that's a buffet. But when you're talking about establishing canopy areas with native canopies, the thing to keep in mind about native canopies is they're subject to the fire cycle, which means they burn through, it opens back up, or there's the dying and shifting, right? If you use a massive berm covered with native trees to hide the incompatible development that you're trying to put in, you're also reducing the actual available area for the tortoises to effectively graze and breed. because they incubate their eggs using sunlight, right? Makes sense. If you're using heavy hardwood canopies, then you're going to affect their ability to actually successfully maintain their population through local breeding. So the plan is to upend what's working and completely recreate it. There's a lot of concern there that in order to fake it while you make it, that you're actually going to damage what you're trying to fix. Pre-survey activities. So when we talk about when the wildlife survey was done, the palm trees on the site, and I'm not saying that this was intentional. That would be wrong. But for trees that have never been harvested for cheeky thatching, and a relatively small number of what's required for that prior to the wildlife surveys was done, and that would have directly impacted the presence of caracaras on board, also bonneted bats. And there was no mention of the bats even being looked for, which are also another species. It was stated that the magnitude of the preservation and restoration can't be overstated. Yes, it can. It was done on Wednesday by not considering the damage that you'll do to the animals that already live there through the excessive noise and completely destroying the habitat to remake it in your image. This talks about corridor protection. This doesn't do that, and I'll talk about that when I actually get to the PowerPoint. Flood mitigation. The question was never really answered. And at least the way you asked it, I don't think that you ever actually got an answer. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I just don't understand the words that are being used. But it never sounded like there was any actual acceptance that the fact that this development will change the flow patterns. We talked about the historic flow patterns, and we talked about how they're already disrupted. That's right, they were disrupted 50 years ago. They've started to kind of recover and develop a natural flow. Around 6 months ago, we had a rainstorm that wasn't even it was a non-seasonal rainstorm. The ground was not saturated. And you can ask the people that live right adjacent to the property. They had water flowing across the street on Terrell Lane and North Olga. I mean, it was flowing 3 to 4 inches deep. That was just rain. That wasn't a tropical storm. That wasn't a hurricane. That wasn't the height of the rainy season, height of a normal rainy season. That was just a winter storm. So it's never really been addressed because the developers are responsible for the water on their project, not off of their project. Well, if this disrupts the normal path, location, flow-wise, everything, it's going to affect the people who don't live on the project. They're the ones that are going to be responsible for it. They're the ones that are going to be holding the bag. But on the site, flooding will be managed. Okay. Otter Creek, we've established that a good portion of Otter Creek is disturbed. Since we're restoring things, are we going to restore that? What's going to happen with all of that river spoil that is currently occupying the Povia piece of this property? Because if the project removes all of that river spoil, that affects the flow too. Are we going to turn the berm into a big dam? It's a question that is worth consideration. In 1993, After massive drainage and flowway projects in East Lee County, we experienced severe flooding. Was anybody here for that? Anybody remember that? Because I could park my truck. At the time I was, 17. I could park my truck in the middle of the road and catch fish out of the back of my truck on these roads. And that was after a huge investment by the county and state to improve drainage, flowway, creek maintenance, everything. I had not seen a project that big in that area at that point in my life. And yet we had flooding that wiped out people's homes. It lasted interminable amounts. And that was a normal rainy season. It was just kind of a lot. Talked about the Babcock green space and using that as an example. Well, that's not really a good indication because that's been gradually reduced if you pay attention to it. The sewer and water expansion, we were told that it was not a backdoor to bonus density. And we all knew that that was not true. But now they're citing it. The sewer and water extension is coming because of this zoning request, not the other way around. If this is approved, this is the only reason. If it's not approved, if this zoning request is as it should be based on incompatibility with the plan, with the wishes of the community, with the best interest of the community, if it was denied, then that extension will not cross there. So we wouldn't be boring under a compromised river and putting it at risk of having, God knows what dumped into it. The LPA denied it because it was not contiguous. The BOCC went around that. They justified it. We altered the path that it was going to go so it wouldn't be directly past Commissioner Greenwell's property, so he didn't have to recuse himself. Which there's a really interesting ethics thing.
Before she objects, I'm sorry, we're not going to allow personal attacks on anybody. So
that was not a personal attack.
I understand, but just calling somebody out by name isn't relevant again to this proceeding. But
Yes,
I understand what you're saying.
Yes, ma'am. I understand. Well, anyway, it's not really clear how the Owl Creek decision was allowed to stand, other than that people were unaware of A, this process, and B, that what was actually entailed. This has been a pretty educational couple of years for almost everybody involved. The threatened impact on the listed species from what's happening in Lee County actually resulted in the assignment of what's called an imperiled species officer. That's a dedicated officer. And part of that, the reason why I bring that up is because it's apparent that that on some level there's recognition that we have to do better, and on the surface, the appeal of this project is that it does those things. But when I actually start my presentation, I want to adjust that and address that. There's an obligation to preserve and protect the natural resources and scenic resources of the area. I mean, just because we've erred in the past doesn't mean we have to carry it forward. Error carried forward is multiplied, and that's what approving this request as it stands is. So how does the plan translate in gopher tortoise and commensal species impacts? So this is the survey that Passarella and Associates did, which, I mean, I think these things are really, really interesting. What you notice, though, if you see, is right around here, you have about 30-something, 33, 34-something burrows. Over here you have some, you know, but most of them are concentrated in this area right here to the south. I can't remember what they call it, south pasture or something like that, or low pasture. So when you, then when you look and they had this, I mean, if I was a professional planner, I would be proud of this just the way it's drawn. It looks pretty. It's very pretty. There's lots of green for preserved space. But then we talk about preserving corridors. Now, if a corridor is like a hallway or a passageway, then this would be a door, this would be a door, this would be a door, this would be a door. This right here isn't a door, but it's that really awkward spot in the hallway at a club where you're forced to walk too close to somebody that you don't want to, so you might avoid it. And then this, the creek and everything, well, that's just a natural impediment for, at least for the gopher tortoises, because not only can they not read, but they can't swim really well. So we break up the little bit of habitat that these guys had. Matter of fact, well, these guys over here might be the only ones who actually benefit from it, but that's actually pretty low. So to go further, when you look, when we talk about the buffers that we're going to put, well, that buffer would extend into here, and if you put heavy tree coverage to protect the neighbors, like you're talking about, as those trees grow, if it's heavy to begin with, you're already going to block out some of the available sunlight for, like I said, the incubation and then you'll the result of a very thick hardwood hammock is that over time it actually causes the more desirable forage plants to thin out, to become less prevalent, which is, you know, it increases forage pressures. So now these gopher tortoises, which can't read and don't know that they're supposed to stay in the preserve areas, they start trying to cross these roads looking for one of the three things that they usually go looking for. In this case, it might be food. They also go looking for burrow sites, and then every spring they get a little randy and they start crawling around looking for love. Well, when you look at this kind of circular fringe of preserve, and you look at where, you look in the center, let me go ahead and move on. So when you look at how it overlays with where the tortoises are actually at and where they're going to want to go, the reason why those burrows are in the center, they kind of rotate around. They usually have 3 to 5 burrows, which also goes down significantly in hardwood hammock areas because of less suitable sites. But with this restored area, well, this area right here, you're going to impact 30 to 40 out of roughly 130 some odd listed gopher tortoise burrows on the site. That also only appeared to account, and I may be wrong in this, but that also appeared to account only for the mature and juvenile, or the senior juvenile tortoises. So I don't know if that accounted for any hatchlings at all. It's not really relevant as far as the age or size, because it still takes out a considerable area here and turns a lot of what they would have used for grazing into water. And again, they like water occasionally in very small amounts, but they can't swim. But you see how this pinch point down here at the mouse keeps disappearing. But down here by the undeveloped square, yeah, it pinches down. So they're either going to come in contact with the residential area, the roadway, or they're going to be hampered by whatever fencing is there. And this is just the goat for tortoises. I mean, this isn't talking about the effects on the other animals, which I'll come back around to. But you see how in space, the wildlife survey looks cool. The plan's pretty. But the plan doesn't really do what it says it's supposed to do when you overlay it with the locations or the way corridors actually work. So consider this. Key pitch point for this development is the preservation and restoration aspect, right? And I'm going to read the PowerPoints just to keep focus. But 2008 study found that 10%, even a 10% loss in habitat resulted in increased habitat fragmentation, and that's important because fragmented corridors increase inbreeding and reduces colony resiliency. Again, I'm going to say that these center areas where the actual development sits is going to be probably more than 10%. But I'm not great at math, so I might be wrong. The shape of the preserve areas, if not a direct fragmentation, creates a gauntlet of travel. So the corridors are supposed to facilitate wildlife travel in search of reproductive opportunities, feeding, just the normal things that wildlife does. The way that these corridors or these preserve areas are set, they don't really provide corridors. They kind of make a gauntlet because just the tortoises alone, they're territorial. They try and flip each other over during breeding season. Do they live in close proximity? Sure, a lot of these actually seem to live close to each other. But when you actually start reducing that ability, their ability to occupy those other burrows, those open areas to feed, and they also feed in a circular pattern typically. When you make these corridors like this, you're taking away from their natural behavior. And this is if we airdropped the development in place, dropped it right down, this incompatible development immediately pops up and everybody goes, wow, those trees weren't there yesterday, but they're there now. That's the optimum for this, right? That's not how this is going to happen. So when you do the restoration and the created habitat, you're going to have to bulldoze or remove or either mechanically or chemically remove a lot of stuff. How are those on-site retention efforts going to be monitored? Who's going to do it? We talk about an acceptable third party. Who's the acceptable party? Acceptable by who? What are the metrics? So in 1989, Lee County tried an experiment. They had a piece of land that was vacant that they weren't going to use for anything, so they decided, hey, and this is before 2020, they decided, hey, we're going to establish a gopher tortoise relocation site. And they relocated about 19 tortoises. Within a year, or it wasn't even a year, it was about 6 months. And go back and check the dates. But within about 6 months, almost all of the tortoises, I think it was 2, remained. They left. They went looking for home. Because what tortoises do or what they found that tortoises do, within about 100 miles of distance from where they're removed from, if the climate's the same, they go looking for where they were, which means they head for the road and they cross the road and they get hit by cars, whatever else. Where relocations work is on islands because they can't go anywhere. But they don't really work as well there either because they get to, I know we like to, I'm not trying to anthropomorphize, and I know I butchered that word. I'm not trying to make them human, but animals get depressed too. And when you take somebody away from their home, they get depressed. So with this intensive site preparation, tortoises tend to not go into their burrows where they're safe. They normally spend about 80% of their time in their burrows. And they get dehydrated, they show malnutrition, all of that stress makes it easier for them to get sick. So that's another thing. So if a colony is left alone and it's mature, it's about 98% stable. That's almost, with the outside of state parks, things like that, that's virtually unheard of in Florida nowadays. It tends to drop off significantly after that. And when I say significant, I'll qualify that. Studies show that you can go from 98% to 6%, but that's within about a year, and then it starts to drop off after that. So the question is, what mitigates this in a compact, intense construction area? Because in order for them to do this, create, preserve, restore, there's going to be noise, there's going to be heavy equipment operation, and what doesn't get driven out by the noise and the stress of the equipment being there, because if it can leave, it will, and if it's too stubborn, which tortoises are, it's going to stay. Then you have vehicle strikes. They've actually been targeted by contractors. And again, I'm not saying Neal employees would do this on purpose. This is experience. When tortoises cross into a construction area, it's like stepping on a cockroach with a bulldozer. That's what happens. So, how does this project satisfy the Gopher Tortoise Management Plan's goals? The Gopher Tortoise Management Plan is a state plan, but it's affected by this. Does it minimize the loss of gopher tortoises? It exposes them to impact and stress mortality. Does it increase and improve gopher tortoise habitat? For 4, it looked like it did. It really seems to fragment their travel and proposes to use heavy canopy cover on areas that they feed and live now. One of the most intensely covered spots, which is heavily covered with Brazilian peppers, but they come out of there onto the areas that are open now to graze. I have never been there near that property and not seen at least 2. So does it enhance and restore gopher tortoise populations? Predicting higher mortality rates based on the first 2 things? It doesn't seem like it, but I could be wrong. Maintain the gopher tortoise's function as a keystone species. Okay, so let's talk about keystone species. A keystone species, which the gopher tortoise is one that is relied on by its friends and neighbors in the animal kingdom for some part of their existence. The gopher tortoise is kind of the original landlord in Florida. Over 350 different species use gopher tortoise burrows for their homes. Some exclusively and can't live without it. Gopher moth. There are impacts here that, because they're not called out in the specific county drawing, we kind of gloss over them. But we're supposed to look at those things because we're looking at part of the survey criteria is the tortoise burrows and the presence of the tortoises. If they're there, these commensals are there. This one, I have a question that I always have to ask the professionals is, the county plan recommends in Table H 150-foot buffer. There's really no mention of that for the tortoises. That's just like a clarification point, always seeking some education here. But for the existing buffers, there is a 25-foot minimum buffer for heavy equipment operation unless you get a permit to destroy the borough, which again, if you destroy something's home, where are you going to put it while you're building it a new one? And there's mixed results on whether starter burrows work. How will the preserve areas protect against mortalities due to canines? You have 1,100 homes going in. I'm pretty sure at least some of those people are going to own dogs. Dogs are really curious, and no matter how friendly your dog is, if he thinks it's a toy, he's going to chew on it. So these are again, just some questions. When was the species study conducted? I know when it was conducted. I did read it, but specifically when was it conducted? Not just in April on these days when the weather outside was 80 degrees. Was it 6 in the morning to after dusk? Was it 8 in the morning when you start work for the day to 5 when you're done? Those are relevant because there are species in the area that are much harder to find, especially doing these transects. And that's kind of how we gloss over them. So it's just a question of, when was it done and how active were the animals at the time? Were there specific burrow investigations done to verify the absence of endangered commensals such as the eastern indigo snake, the gopher frog, the gopher mouse, the Florida pine snake? I didn't see that mentioned in there. Again, it was actually kind of, like I read what I could find, but I didn't see that mentioned. Or I saw not present, but I didn't see anything that showed how they determined that it was not present other than, well, we didn't see it. Well, did you look in the burrow where it usually lives? And then the reason why all of this is important, and I realize that this is not specific to the project, but I'm going to throw it in here anyway, because it's a philosophy point, if nothing else. So in 2022, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife denied endangered species protections for gopher tortoises. So they're not federally protected. They remain state protected. But on July 16th, a formal peer-reviewed letter published in Global Ecology and Conservation illustrated that the thinking behind that decision was based on a very, very flawed, error-prone study. At the time, it projected that there would be 60% or 67% remaining gopher tortoises in the state. As a realist, that's a fantastic number for a threatened species, because anything above 50, it might be viable. It's able to recover. But they found that it was based on accelerated recovery rates because they were attributing biological factors that simply aren't biologically achievable. The sexual maturation of the tortoises being much higher than expected, the loss of habitat being much lower than planned. Approving, again, this development, which is incompatible with the area, which is not the sterling preservation beacon that it tries to present itself at when you actually look at how animals live and the amount of preparation that would go into the site. That 1%, that expected 1%, every tortoise matters more than it did on July 15th, because now we know better. That's really what I have. This is, again, it's incompatible with the area, and what we're saying, those things either need to be addressed or just take, or on that merit alone, something has to be done. But to say that we're going to put 788 homes if we can't put in 11 or 100, 1,100, 1,099, whatever it is, I mean, that's like saying, I'm going to hit you with this brick if I can't hit you with this glove. Seems like a threat.
Before you leave, I have a couple questions.
Sure, I have a couple answers.
Are you aware of the fact that gopher tortoises are regulated by the FWC?
Yes, ma'am, I am. Do you realize that the county has an obligation to preserve them too?
I'm asking the questions.
I'm answering your questions.
And are you an expert in wetland and wildlife ecology?
So, as a member of a citizen group that's focused on it, working with FWC on a weekly basis, and having experience with these for over 30 years, as I stated, I'm not certified. It's not written in paper. But when I look at that project, it's the most embarrassing statement to say I professionally support it that anybody can make, because it factually doesn't do what we said it does.
Okay,
And
so
when
the
you
answer
look-
is you don't have the qualifications.
No, I absolutely have the qualifications based on lived experience and actual experience with these animals. It's a fact, and we both know it. So I've heard you try to disestablish or disaccount.
Sir, I'm sorry, for everyone's education, I don't know if you're familiar with the administrative code, and Florida law allows participants, which are members of the public, to provide testimony, and doing so you are subject to cross-examination by
Yes,
the
ma'am.
parties, which are the applicant and the staff. Unfortunately, Florida law does not afford the same opportunity, again, for the participants to cross-examine. So it really is not a discussion, it's just a direct answer to the questions that she's asking. And her questions they cannot intimidate, they cannot harass, and if it gets into that, certainly we will stop it. But her question right now is simply to restate your qualifications, which you have done, and
Yes,
then
ma'am.
that's the record.
I understand that they can't in letter, but when you ask people to qualify in the manner or the tone that she has over the past 2 days, there is an absolute intent to intimidate.
I understand, and I understand that, again, I know that passions are high, and I receive that, I feel it, I understand, and I don't want anyone to feel like that's not being communicated, because it is, but my job as well is to preserve the proceedings, and so everybody has rights. I will ask, again, if you can just narrow the questions to the specific question, and leave it at that. We don't need to get into intense cross-examination on any, I don't think, of this testimony.
And I appreciate the fact that you put it in a PowerPoint, his questions, and we will have our wetland and wildlife ecologists address those questions.
Thank you. And did you want to enter in your PowerPoint into the record?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Thank you.
Madam Chair,
Actually,
again, before we move on, I did want to make a comment. I didn't get a chance until after the witness spoke, Ms. Schwartz. There were two documents, several copies of them, but essentially two documents. One was an article on light pollution. I just want to note for the record that there's nothing in there that indicates that the Lee County lighting standards don't address that, so it's just a document. And the rest of it is a compilation of documents, communications between the City of Fort Myers and DEP. That's not really an issue in the zoning case. The Lee plan requires this project to connect to central water and sewer, and we're not in a process of delving into where the city is in regard to their DEP issues. We will have to now respond to that, but I just want to state that without the ability to cross-examine the people that provided those documents, produced them, it's a due process question.
Okay, thank you. That's noted for the record. The next card that I have is for Cary+Duke+Povia. I apologize if I mispronounced that. Sokup? Charles? Not present, okay. Ellie Hagan? Just in case.
first day.
No, it's from today. Maria put it on there. It says, I think it says Hex meeting, Ellie Hagan. That one? Right there.
Is this one?
Top one, yeah.
Oh, there it is. Okay.
Okay.
There you go.
And then where do I? Okay.
Good morning.
Good morning. My name is Ellie Hagan. I live at 14280 Duke Highway. My next door neighbor and brother-in-law is Richard Durling, who could not be here today. He is out of the country, and he has asked me to read a statement from him, if that's appropriate.
Yes, it
Okay.
is. Wait one second, I've got a card for him, so should I pull that
Yeah.
out and just say that that's
Yes,
been
ma'am.
written? Okay.
Even though I am unable to attend this public hearing because I'm out of the country, I still want to go on public record so I may maintain my standing and be able to address the county commission when this rezoning issue goes before them. Respectively submitted, Richard Durling, 14300 Duke Highway. Madam Hearing Examiner, I have lived in Lee County practically my entire life, having moved here with my parents, brother, and sister in 1969. Back then, the Edison Mall, which was built in 1965, was the center of activity, and Daniels Parkway was a dirt road, little more than a trail. Development was not only wanted, but welcomed in this sleepy county. For those who recently moved here, they would not recognize nor probably appreciate Lee County of yesteryears. A lack of shopping, dining, and entertainment would have been and was the argument for new development. Now in 2024, 55 years later, it hardly resembles the county of those earlier years, and for the most part, it is a good thing. It is what the citizens of the county wanted. With it came more shopping, dining, entertainment, jobs, and success. Many have made a good life for themselves and their families and a lot of money, and there's nothing wrong with that. But during those explosive growth years, the struggle and the objective was to manage growth, and the Florida State Legislature enacted new laws and procedures to address the issue of growth. One of those actions was to have local government create and adopt comprehensive plans with goals and objectives, the land and the impact of development in their respective counties. I know these measures and actions because I was involved in the process. I helped develop these policies, having served on the LPA. The outcome was the Lee County Comprehensive Plan, the plan that was and is mandated by the state government. If you go on the internet and look up Lee County Comprehensive Plan, you will see the Lee Plan maps. And if you click on that, the very first map at the top of this list is Future Land Use Map. Now, as the name implies, this map was to show where growth and certain development was meant to go as Lee County grew and was developed into the future, hence the name Future Land Use Map. Based on this map, it is safe to say that most people, citizens in this county, might think that this map is a blueprint or a plan for future development. And that being the case could be relied on when making decisions on things like where they wanted to live and raise a family. So when people, citizens, want to live a more rural lifestyle, perhaps to raise animals as well as children, or to enjoy open spaces and less congestion, that they could rely on the future land use map to show them where those rural and agricultural areas are. Or could they? Now that many people and families have made the move to areas designated rural agricultural on the future land use map, investing lots of resources and money and time and effort, they are being told that they may have misplaced their trust and reliance on what was developed by the county to guide the citizens into the future. Can these people, citizens, really rely on this map? Now, to make it even more difficult to understand, the county officials and supporting staff seem to have overlooked the concerns of citizens living in these areas for the benefit of a small but influential group wanting to impact the area and their way of life. The original rules have been subverted and new rules adopted to grant changes to the future land use map for the benefit of some, but not the people, the citizens living in the areas affected. Staff may have found that the proposed changes qualify and are satisfied with the changes, but the people and the citizens affected by these changes, are they satisfied? I would say not. Lee County's own comprehensive plan speaks through its policies to these areas designated rural and agricultural. The policies speak to the character and nature of the area. It speaks to the type of development and the density of such development. It says that changes and increases cannot be made. And why? Because these areas were intended to be what they are identified as, rural and agricultural. That is what the future of this area was supposed to be. Let's not completely build over all the areas of Lee County. Let's leave some of it as was anticipated and planned to be, open and rural. We are a very special place. Lee County is a very special county. We've done a great job managing our growth and development, planning for its future, unlike many areas of Florida. Let's not make a big mistake now. The future is at stake. Richard Durling, 14300 Duke Highway in Alva.
Did you want to enter that into the record too, ma'am?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
I have two areas I want to speak on today. Something that we want to ensure that goes into the record is the creation of the North Olga Planning Panel and how that originated. The North Olga Planning Area was established around 2010 and as a result separated from Alva, although the addresses still contain an Alva postal address. The proposed idea was that this new local community could do better, direct changes to the Lee County, could better direct changes to the Lee County Comprehensive Plan than the larger county-wide body that was previously charged with this oversight. It was met with much opposition at the time because only 7 wealthy, powerful, and connected landowners were chosen to serve on the North Olga Community Planning Panel. At the time, there were 613 eligible parcels with owners who could have served on the panel, meaning about 600 parcels and even more individual property owners were included in an area with absolutely no say. Many of these residents voiced their opinions to the county through emails and public address, but the powerful few hired even more powerful lawyers and planning professionals who successfully argued their case and established the North Olga Community Planning Panel. One public record, a letter from attorney Richard Pringle of Strayhorn Firm to Kathy Ebaugh of Lee County Department of Community Development states, the reality is that...
Madam, I'm going to interpose an objection at this point in time. There's no relevancy to this zoning hearing as to the creation of the, in fact, behind the North Olga Community Plan. What's in black and white is what's controlling.
You can continue. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm sorry. One public record, a letter from attorney Richard Pringle of Strayhorn Law Firm to Kathy Ebaugh of Lee County Department of Community Development states, the reality is that a vocal minority of community members should not dictate anyone's reaction to the planning efforts of the North Olga Community Planning Panel. The additional reality is that a majority of the landowners and interested parties in the North Olga community supports the North Olga Community Planning Panel efforts. One would need to read the public letters submitted and compare the names of those who submitted letters to the corresponding tax rolls and see whether you think a majority of the residents and landowners in Alva, North Olga really supported this panel and its proposed changes. Is that better? Okay. The overarching theme of the majority of the letters seemed to be that these people felt like they were thrust into a district they didn't want and were not going to have a voice on the panel. And I do have copies of those letters that I'll put into the record. Looking at the documents submitted by members who were pushing for the new district, the North Olga Community Planning Panel doesn't seem so bad. Take this excerpt from a public document to include the North Olga Vision Statement, as well as their 10 guiding principles, prepared by Alexis Crespo, a professional planner working at Waldrop Engineering. The Vision Statement for North Olga: to establish a community plan in order to preserve and promote the unique rural character, historic heritage, and quality of life in North Olga, as well as proactively and appropriately plan for the area. The North Olga Community Plan goals, objectives, and policies, GOP, address preservation of the existing rural character and unique historical background that North Olga has retained through the years. The GOPs also speak to higher standards for future development in terms of landscaping, open space provisions, architecture, and the protection of environmentally sensitive lands. Additionally, it is the intent of the plan to support economic development throughout the community, including nature-based tourism and agricultural operations. The implementation of this vision will assist in creating a strong sense of identity in the North Olga community and further establish this area as a unique community within Eastern Lee County. I do have a list of the guiding principles. There are 10 of those. I won't read those today, but I'll put those into the record.
Are you referencing, just so for my edification, are you referencing the current policies that are in the Lee Plan, or are you referencing drafts that predated those policies?
It was the draft, the initial
Okay.
plan.
Does that reflect what's in the current plan, or is that reflect what's in the current plan?
It should, yes.
Okay, we have that then. That part does not need to be entered into the record.
Okay.
Thank you.
After reading this, it's easy for Alva residents to get on board with this new district and agree that all of these guiding principles and the vision statement. If only the panel and Lee County worked together to make that a reality, there'd be no need for any opposition. It seems, since the inception, that the panel has failed on guiding principle number 10, as a huge majority of individual landowners have been excluded from the conversation, or can I say disenfranchised, and therefore a few wealthy and powerful owners who stand to make a fortune at the expense of their neighbors' quality of life, which is to be explicitly protected under guiding principle number 5. So with the new district area defined and the panel in place, what do you think the very first order of business was? Do you think it was something to support the community who already feels like they have no voice? Or do you think it was something that violated a guiding principle? Would you be shocked to learn it violated the mission statement and just about all of the guiding principles? The following is from a memorandum to add a few items to the community panel that were inadvertently omitted from the previous filing. Land use amendments that would increase the allowable total density of Alva are prohibited, and that was exchanged with discouraged. They struck out prohibited and replaced it with discouraged, which is an infinitely lower bar to clear. Our current commissioner served as president and on other positions of the board of the North Olga Planning Commission from 2013 until he resigned in order to file for Lee County Commission in 2022. The current board still operates in a way that disenfranchises the majority of the community of North Olga. And that, in part, is how we arrived here today. Finally, I'd like to speak as a resident of 14280 Duke Highway. I am directly across the street from the proposed development, and I'm in agreement with the community members who have spoken before me. The objective and policies of the Lee County Comprehensive Plan are to help preserve the unique and rural character of the North Olga area. Surrounding property includes 120 acres of land that includes North River Oaks, which has homes on 5 to 8 acres, as well as additional agricultural land. Across North River Road, there is no development allowed within 1,300 feet of North River Road. To the east, Ag 2 properties in the rural and wetlands future land use categories. To the south, properties are separated by Duke Highway, which are Ag 2 and large residential lots. To the west is Owl Creek, where the county has approved 380 homes for Neal communities, including duplexes, a marina, and amenities on only 342 acres. This property only has a 20-foot setback on North River Road. Which one of these doesn't fit? Just because Owl Creek was approved doesn't mean it's right. Now we are looking at an additional 1,099 dwelling units, including duplexes right next door. This planned development does not comply with the Lee Plan and is not compatible with existing and planned uses in surrounding areas. It is estimated that this community alone will generate more than 9,000 trips per day on County Road 78 North River Road, tripling the current traffic. Lee County staff has reported that the development does not adversely impact the surrounding roadway network, even though 78 and State Road 31 intersection is predicted to operate at an F rating near gridlock in 2030 after development. How will the county address this impact on transportation? Staff notes that the intersection improvements are mitigated through a payment of roadway impact fees. That doesn't solve the problem. The Lee County Metropolitan Planning Organization, MPO, is the county's transportation partnership responsible for transportation plannings in Bonita, Cape Coral, Estero, Fort Myers Beach, Sanibel, and unincorporated Lee County. The MPO's 2045 transportation plan states that County Road 78 is considered a constrained road. Constrained roadways are defined through local policies as roads not eligible for widening based on environmental impacts, impacts to existing neighborhoods and businesses, and limitations of the existing right-of-way. How can we approve 1,099 more residences, all entering and exiting on a 2-lane highway that is already at its breaking point? Our rural community will be in constant gridlock. Residents of Duke Highway were informed on Wednesday that we are in a pinch area, meaning we have the least protection from this development, 170 feet. Interesting, when you look at the seller, Mr. Cary's property on Serenoa, he has the largest protection. To me, as not a professional, it looks like nearly a mile behind his home. Why did the residents of Duke Highway get the least amount of protection when the person that chose to sell this property gets the most? Mr. Neal said on Wednesday that his business is to sell homes, and buyers know within 30 seconds if they will buy. In looking at this map, it's my opinion, not a professional, that the larger homes will be at the front of the development because that's where Mr. Neal wants them to see first, and the duplexes will be placed in the back of the property, abutting Duke Highway, where homes are currently for sale for $2 to $4 million and up to 8 acres in size. So with that logic, there will be at least 10 attached homes within 170 feet of our property, and the same number right across the street from those homes. Right now, if I stand on my front porch, I can see over to my neighbor's balcony and have a conversation, and he's 170 feet away. But he's my brother-in-law, and we intended it that way. The petitioner has showed us landscaping that will provide line-of-sight protection, but what about protection from noise and light? I don't know about you, but in the fall, winter, and spring, we open up our home and turn the air conditioning off. What is the petitioner going to do to protect us from the noise coming from these homes? Not just the people, but the air conditioning units, lawn mowers, and construction. What about a real barrier to mitigate sound? How will we be protected from unnecessary light at night? What will the petitioner do to incorporate environmentally responsible outdoor light to protect the night sky and sensitive wildlife? According to Dark Sky International, artificial light and sound produced by humans has negative and deadly effects on many creatures, including birds, mammals, insects, and plants. One of the criteria that must be met by Neal communities is that the development must not adversely affect environmentally critical or sensitive area and natural resources. The proposal that Neal community has offered promises these clustered homes will allow them to create, preserve, and restore indigenous, rare, and unique upland habitat. His team have stated they will not come back and look for additional density. How are we to believe these promises will come to fruition? Mr. Neal has shown a disregard for zoning designations, the environment, and the citizens impacted by his developments, which has been well documented by reputable media.
Madam Hearing Examiner, I'm going to object to this testimony. This is a personal attack on Mr. Neal. That's not appropriate in these proceedings.
If you could move on to the next one,
Address
please.
the zoning criteria.
Well, in one area, he did rezone a preserve area to a Publix. And the owners in that area said they felt they had been given a bait and switch. And that's truth, not a personal attack. Finally, in January 2024, Patrick Neal, president of Neal Communities, spoke at a Lee County Commission meeting concerning sewer hookups for this proposed community. There's no doubt that if we don't get this comprehensive plan amendment, we will go ahead with construction of the homes on a septic system because that's the law in the counties, Mr. Neal said. I think everyone who has spoken over the past several days would be happy to take Mr. Neal up on this promise. As a resident of North Olga, I ask you not to recommend approval of this rezoning request, and I appreciate your time.
Thank you. We are going to take a break at this point to give everyone a moment to rest, so we'll reconvene at 10:45. Record. The next card that I have is for, I believe this says Cody Pierce. I apologize if I butchered your name at all, sir.
It's okay, it's spelled uniquely. Good morning. My name is Captain Cody Pierce. I am a lifelong Lee County resident, and I currently serve as waterkeeper for Colusa Waterkeeper. So I'm here today to go on the record in opposition of this development. I'd just like to highlight a couple of issues that I think that we have due to infrastructure. So first and foremost, any of us that have spent any time off of River Road have definitely noticed the increase in traffic. As we know, there have been developments that have occurred here in previous years that is increasing the amount of traffic that this poor road is having to serve for the community. So that is the first and foremost reason that I'd like to provide in opposition. I believe that this increases the likelihood of road mortality for a lot of species. And this general area east of 31 does serve as an important wildlife corridor for the north to south transportation of animals in this area. You know, being in Lee County for my entire life, I think that we can all agree that this place has, you know, increased probably beyond the greatest imagination of our early forefounders. Now that we're in 2024, we're more known as a metropolis than we are as this quaint little town that we used to be known for. I'd like to just highlight as well, you know, that the Caloosahatchee River is impaired for a number of parameters. One of those is going to be nutrients. When we add, you know, a nutrient or a natural resource, you know, consuming entity like a community of this scale, I think it just increases the likelihood that we're going to have to deal, you know, with some potential stormwater issues that are inside of the river area. So this does cause great concern for us. You know, I don't think that we have the infrastructure currently to support a neighborhood of this, you know, of this amount of people, and so I just wanted to go on the record for those two excerpts. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for coming today. Next, we have Monica Busby. Good morning.
Good morning. I am the owner of 2 parcels equaling approximately 39 acres on my small farm, which is just around the corner from the Cary+Duke+Povia property. Could you start again, please? Sure. Can you hear me now? Try it again. Okay. Good morning. I'm the owner of 2 parcels equaling approximately 39 acres. My small farm is just around the corner from the Cary+Duke+Povia property. Although I know today I may be part of the minority speaking in support of this development, I felt it was important for these families selling this land to know not everyone is against it. As I watched the gentleman speak yesterday, stating his family has been good stewards of the land and the family had finally decided to sell, I can appreciate that decision. There are properties for sale every day, and the people that own them should not feel so much pressure to have others around them influence that decision when their time comes. If they want to sell, or let's just say need to sell. In the event they do sell, realtors, surveyors, businesses, in general, just benefit from a time a piece of land is sold. I can list the names of realtors I've met and even calls from friends over the years that have encouraged landowners such as myself to sell. I hold no negativity towards any of them. They're just trying to make a living. Sure, I would have loved it to look just like it did on my bus ride to school. As a small child, however, it isn't realistic. Having seen the growth Babcock has had on our community, along with the growth, it has brought change and opportunity for all. It has brought with it a lot of conveniences. This property we are discussing today is a very small in comparison to Babcock Ranch. That was also at one time owned by a family that had to make a tough decision to sell. There are many costs that landowners accrue owning a property, taxes, maintenance, fence repairs, liability. I know that myself, just having a small farm. Liability insurance, you have to pay over those years. I would imagine after maintaining a piece of land all those years, they deserve the right to benefit from that sale as well. That's the point of my comment today. I don't see an issue with that. I felt this family deserved the same respect. In my opinion, they should be able to move forward with the best decision for the maximum benefit of the family as I see fit. There have been comments made about the road and traffic and the speed and growth, which has already happened. Those statements are accurate. People are speeding. People have been speeding on this road and other roads for years. This development isn't going to change anyone's speed. That solution will only take place if enough people speaking on this topic today were to request a meeting with the Sheriff's Department to remedy that issue. Overall, if people want to say on what is done with someone's property, I feel like before any of this comes about, they should have got together as a group and purchased it years ago for the desires they have voiced. I respect everyone's rights, their opinions. We are all allowed to feel and think differently, but several people that spoke don't even live right in this area in question. The family is asking for nothing different than if one of us were the owners of the parcel and we were to benefit financially from the sale. I think all they're asking for you to grant them is what as landowners deserve. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Thank you for coming today. Next, I have Ralph Bond. Good morning.
Good morning. Well, I wasn't prepared for this. I got a call, and I was trying to stay out of it because a lot of my neighbors, I guess I could be described as one of the rich, powerful, large landowners in the area, according to these folks. That's my piece of property right directly across, probably, it's right next, just due east of this property on 78. And I have to apologize for skipping and going around. I don't have a prepared statement. Basically, been listening to what's being said here. And if we were all honest with ourselves, we're coming up with the tortoises and the birds and the bugs and the water and the flow and all this. That's just because it sounds good. If everybody had their way, it would stay just the way it is right now and there'd be nothing done there, but you can't say that because it doesn't sound good. Just noticing this building, you see all these old pictures of Fort Myers, see how it used to look? This building we're in right now, it's no longer the courthouse. Why is that? Things change. Everything changes. The development came from the East Coast across to Collier County, went into Collier County, come into Bonita, which is some of the worst land ever tried to develop there is, but that cancer spreads, it don't leapfrog very much. It's developed all the way up to us, and now it's our turn. As far as these land use and rule and designation and all this, those things are put in there, but everything's in there for a time being. As the need changes, the plans change. It stops what they call urban sprawl from leapfrogging. Develop here, have this a little bit less density. As the need comes, you change it, it comes there, make this a little bit, and it just grows like in cancer. Everybody's, you know, the few people for the good and for what we want and this, that, and the other. Get their money together, come buy it. I'll sell my land to anybody who wants to buy it. They can sit around and roast s'mores and sing kumbaya until their cows come home. Talk about farmers. If you're rich enough to be a farmer in today's world, you don't need a job. Save the money, you can retire. There's no money in it. Can't be done. As far as drainage on that piece of property there, I'm well aware of it. It's a big mountain right now of spoil. That spoil is going to go away. With all the regulations and the way they're going to make him drain that property, it's going to drain better than it ever did, even 100 years ago. Talking about dams, all these houses where these people are living along Duke Highway. I remember when there was no houses on Duke Highway. Born and raised here just like everybody else. Well, not everybody, but a lot of us. Their houses damming up more water than what it is there because when those houses were built, the regulations weren't like what they are now. Eagles, I got them right on my place. I watched them blow out of the tree 3 times. You know what they did? Build another one. The Cary bird, he ain't even native to here. So, I mean, all this stuff that we're talking about, basically what everybody's here is, it's beautiful, I agree with that. Nobody wants criminals on the street, but they don't want the prison next door to their house either. And I understand what they're looking, it's beautiful. But things change. And I mean, that's all I gotta say. And I don't like it particularly when people say for the betterment of the people and this, that, and the other. If they were honest with themselves, and when you cut density on my property, what they're trying to do here is what they're talking about, the density. From what it is now, to 1.4, 1.5, or whatever it's getting there. When I sell my land, whoever comes and buys that's gonna pay me on the highest and best use. So that basically, if I can get 1.5 units to the acre, it's worth 1/3 more than what it is if I can only have 1 unit to the acre. So I just don't think that anybody should be able to dictate to me what I do on my land, especially if I'm following all the rules and the guidelines that the state of Florida and with the county, and they're going on about the commissioners and this, that, and the other. It's my understanding that the state instituted some of that density increase on that water and sewer because they wanted to get people away from using wells and septic tanks. And in order to do that, they had to incentivize the people that were actually doing that so that they could offset some of the costs that it would bear to do so. So in doing that, the only way they could do it without actually just providing and paying for the water and sewer themselves, they get the developer to put the water and the sewer in there, and then they incentivize him to recapture some of that money by increasing his density. He's not going to do that if it's all on his dime. We all go to work for that profit margin. And I just think a lot of stuff that's being said here, the tortoises, the bugs, like I said before, and everything else that's going on, and about the drainage, and about the panthers, and agricultural, rural lifestyle. As far as I know, I'm looking around here, I don't see but one goddamn farmer in this building, and that's me. So that's all I got to say about it. I wasn't going to come here. I got a phone call this morning. They said they were talking about my property last week in a meeting, or a couple days ago, whenever it was, and they said, you better go down there and tell them, you know, what you think. And so that's all I got to say about that.
Thank you. Thank you for coming today, sir. Next card I have is for Keith Durling. Good morning.
Good morning. First, I'd like to say that I do agree with all the comments that have been made by the people of Alva the last few days. Certainly not with that last man. And thank you. I appreciate you being so engaging and actually listening to people. I've been to several county commissioner meetings, and they're very dismissive of us. And so you actually showing interest. You know, you're not only listening to Neil people, but you're listening to us, and that's very refreshing. And actually, oddly enough, I kind of like to thank Neil's attorney, who was asking people the other day, well, how close do you live to the site? You know, and people are like, I'm a mile away, I'm 5 miles away, I'm a couple miles away. Oh, you know, it's going to impact everybody, for sure. But you know what? I'm right there on Duke Highway. You know what the setback is? 170 feet. So, look at that big old piece of property, 788 acres. That's a lot of property. They're protecting 420 acres. They're gonna make it into wetlands. They're gonna create these wetlands. Yet, I have this on my front yard, 170 feet. How would that man that just spoke, would you like that to happen on 170 feet from your property?
If you
yeah,
I'm
you
sorry,
wouldn't like
sir,
it.
Excuse me. Excuse me, sir. Sir, excuse me. Sir.
Yeah, move the fucking mute,
Sir,
you want more,
excuse me.
motherfucker. Move the fucking mute. He called me out. I didn't call him out.
Hey, I'm just saying.
At me.
I'm just saying.
Yes.
Call the bailiff.
Yeah, excuse me, we need to recess. Can someone please call a bailiff?
He called me out. With all you
Or yeah.
You got to leave.
That was not a
Mr.
personal
Neal, Mr.
attack.
Terry,
I'm just
anybody
saying, how
else
would
you
you
don't
like that?
out of this, and stick to the zoning
I
criteria.
understand, and as I said earlier, I know that passions are high on this. I know that it's everyone's home, and I understand that. We need to have safety, public safety, please. That is our first priority in this room. And so if I understand tensions are high, if everybody can just take a moment and breathe, if we need to call a recess, we can do that. Certainly, we need to have a bailiff in this room, so I am hopeful that that happens soon. Yes, I agree. So, no, well, yes, you can be. So let's take another 5-minute break, please, and let's try to get somebody present in the room so that we can address that concern. Thank you. Okay, everyone, we are going to get back on the record. I just want to again thank everybody for staying calm, and again, safety is our first priority, so we can begin now, and I appreciate your patience. Thank you, sir. If you could resume your comments where you left off.
Thank you. Just please give me a heads up if somebody else comes towards me. I'd appreciate it. And in response to that gentleman,
I'm sorry, we're not going to respond to the gentleman.
All right.
I agree.
Well,
We
just
don't need to get
as a
into it.
personal comment, I'm not against developing this land. I'm not. And I understand change happens. My brother builds homes, so I realize it's a good thing. I'm just against the 40% density increase. That's pretty much what it comes down to. Thank you. So, getting back to the 100...
Gentlemen, I'm sorry. I'm having a hard time hearing. Thank you. I apologize to interrupt the conversation. Thank you, sir.
Getting back to the 170-foot setback, you know, I think the people on Duke Highway are the biggest losers in this whole project. You look at North River Oaks, which is a beautiful development, just as beautiful as what we have, and I know Mr. Cary lives there. I'm not sure if I can mention his name, but he lives there. And to the western part of that subdivision, and look at all that space. I mean, here's the man that's creating this problem for everybody, yet he gets all this space. He's getting a lot of money.
I'm sorry, I'm going to object again to the personal attacks and personal comments.
Again, if we could
have to stick to the zoning criteria.
Isn't it a fact?
And
it's
besides the fact, Mr. Cary, as a former judge, has his address and location protected, and you're destroying that protection.
Again, if the testimony just needs to be relevant to the request, and so not the ownership or how it's held. For example, the county cannot regulate if it's a condo or if it's an apartment. If they were doing that kind of development, we don't get into ownership. So if you could just limit it to the project and what your comments are related to that.
Okay, well, that nice piece of property that looks like a state park next to North River Oaks, I would like to have that buffer. I don't know why that buffer is there, but I'm sure because of the creek is there and stuff like that, but these designers, I'm sure, can make it happen. I mean, it's 170 foot just doesn't seem reasonable to me. And it's an affordable housing community. I'm not sure how many people in this room have been in one of those recently when it's fully populated. Probably not anybody here, but I go through them fairly often. I'm sure Mr. Neal goes through them when when they're finished, but do you go through it when they're populated? And the first thought I have when you go in there is, look at all the vehicles. These places are jam-packed with cars. There's never enough parking. And I haven't heard anybody talk about homeowners. I'm sure it's going to have a homeowners in this community, I'm assuming. And I'm sure that's going to control work vehicles, trucks, box vans, things like that. You know, there's not going to be boats, and hopefully all this is not going to be there. Trailers, motorhomes. I'm assuming that that's the way it's going to be. So, again, I'm 170 feet away from this thing. Sounds like there's going to be a berm, which is good, but to be honest with you, and the landscape experts saying we're going to plant all this foliage, you're never going to see it. Yeah, we're going to see it, we're going to hear it. There's no doubt about that. I think there should be a bigger setback, obviously. I think there should be a wall, to be honest with you. That'd cut down the noise and the site. And I'd much rather look at a wall than a cluster community, I'm sorry to say. So, or even better, we have 420 acres that are protected that we're going to turn into wetlands, well, why don't we put that on Duke Highway? Why don't we take, I don't know, several hundred acres and put it there? Why don't we get a buffer? I think we're getting the worst part of this whole deal. We really are. And you know what? Like I said, I don't mind them building this. I want what I was promised 35 years ago when I bought this property. 1 home per acre. Go ahead and do that. Mr. Neal, there was a graphic up there saying that's what he was going to do. Why can't we all agree then? Let's do that. It seems like the reasonable thing to do. But we're not going to do it. I don't know why. So anyway, I've owned this property on Duke Highway since 1989. I purchased this property back then because I knew it was a rural part of the county, surrounded by Ag 2 property like the one I bought. So I knew one day if they were going to develop it, it was going to be 1 home per acre. When the Lee County Comprehensive Plan came out in 1995, it assured me that the Alva area would stay the way it was meant to be, rural. Within the plan it states, Goal 27, maintain, enhance, and support the heritage, rural character, natural resources, and agricultural lands. That sounds good. In addition, the Lee Plan for North Olga Community Plan states in Goal 29 that it will promote and support the unique rural character, heritage, economy, quality of life, and natural resources in North Olga Community Plan area. I'm on board with all that. It makes me feel good as a homeowner out there. So changing the zoning to residential plan development does not mean anything within this comprehensive plan. How will increasing the density of these 788 acres to 40% meet this requirement? Neal wants to make this a cluster community which doesn't meet the rural character or quality of life issues in Alva. It's very clear. Isn't the Burt-Harris Act meant to protect me as a homeowner against influential developers? I think it is. Will this cluster affordable housing community impact the value of my property? Well, I believe it will. My property value will decrease, which is a violation of Burt-Harris. Government actions can't unfairly diminish the value of my property without providing just compensation. I think having affordable housing 170 feet from my front yard, I think that counts. Would a rezoning approval of this property create an undue burden on existing infrastructure? Well, that's a no-brainer. Of course it would. Building an additional 1,100 homes off of 2-lane North River Road will obviously impact traffic, which is a quality of life issue. So shouldn't rezoning any area within Lee County be in the best interest of the county and the community instead of a developer? That seems like a no-brainer to me. So who is benefiting? Well, who's benefiting from the 40% density increase? Well, of course, it's benefiting a handful of people. The existing property owners in Neal communities will benefit financially, and Alva and Lee County residents will be the losers. So because Neal and these property owners will make a lot of money, we all must suffer. Why does greed always seem to win out over common sense and integrity? I don't know. I can't answer these questions. Alva has always been a rural environment and attracted people who want to live the same lifestyle. With this density increase, we're attracting people who want a home at a reasonable price and really couldn't care less about living in the country. These people will live all the way out in Alva and then will have to commute to other parts of the county. They'll have to go back to Fort Myers or Cape Coral. How is that going to fix our traffic problem, which is already a mess, as everybody knows? And I saw recently on the news the other day where Sanibel just passed a affordable housing community. And I was like, wow, that surprised me. Well, then you get to hear the details, and, well, it's 18 units. And the reason they're doing it is because there's people out there that work in the restaurants, and they need a place to live. That makes sense. We're building 1,100 homes out in the country where there's no jobs, and then these people are going to have to go back into the city to work or wherever they go. It absolutely doesn't make any sense. So I think North River Road will have to be widened from 2 lanes to 4 lanes to support this increase, since this cluster community will triple the population of the area. So why do we continue to bend over backwards for developers and new developments over the rights of the people who have been here for years, decades, and generations? Our commissioner continues to tell us development is coming and there's nothing we can do about it. And I accept the fact development is coming, but isn't his job to control the growth? I really think it is. not approve every zoning change that appears in front of him. He approves everything. The county commissioners don't have to approve this rezoning. They shouldn't approve it, but they will. They rarely explain why they decide the way they do, but if they do this time, it'll surely be because of the Burt Harris Act. But what about the people? What about us? The people have already homesteaded here in Alva for a rural lifestyle. The other person that benefits from this rezoning, of course, is our commissioner. It's difficult to understand that.
I'm going to object at this point in
I'm
time.
sure you are.
Again, we have got to stop having personal attacks on people, including commissioners. It's not the issue before the hearing examiner.
If you can just, again, not signal out individuals. You can, of course, as a citizen, you can express displeasure or frustration with the process and those things.
Well, there's property on Route 31, 76 acres, that was recently rezoned, and this property is as commercial, which will allow 400,000 square feet of commercial buildings. Somebody that's connected to that is a decision-making person on what's going to happen with that property, with the Duke Cary property. So let's suppose the commissioners approve the 40% increase of the 780-acre property, which they will. Wouldn't that make this commercial property on 31 more valuable, knowing that the density increase provides a larger population in North Alva, which are potential patrons for a 400,000 square foot commercial buildings that he's trying to sell? How is this not a conflict? It is a conflict, no matter what they say. So no matter how their high-priced attorneys spin and try to justify all this, I think everybody here knows what's going on is wrong. The people of Alva bought into this community and the lifestyle. We've paid our taxes for years and decades. We've been great stewards of this land, and now we're going to allow some outside developer to come in here and change the rules, change our community based on his attorney's interpretation of the Lee County Comprehensive Plan. It's absolute nonsense. Why can't this property be developed as intended, 1 home per acre? I'm sure there's money to be made that way. Then we maintain, enhance, support the heritage, rural character, and natural resources stated in the comprehensive plan. Maybe it's because Neil said that it doesn't fit their development plan. Well, I guess there's probably more money to be made in a cluster community. I don't know. So why is this our problem? Why can't he just go somewhere else? There are plenty of other areas in our county that are designated as residential plan developments, yet Neil insists on doing it here. A message needs to be sent. Enough is enough. The county commissioners continue to approve every density increase proposed, and in return, we're overdeveloping, overpopulating this beautiful county in Florida. We must do the right thing and stop Neil from building this cluster community eyesore that will dramatically change Alva forever. And just to close, I thank you again for your attention and everything. I think you're doing a good job. I think you're going to be very objective about this, which is very refreshing. And I think even if you do support the people of Alva, I don't think it matters. I think the commissioners are going to vote in favor of Neil. I think it's a done deal. I think it's already done. So it's sad for me because I've had this property for 35 years. Over the years, we've had hundreds, if not thousands, of people come out, and every time people come out, they're like, wow, it's beautiful out here. The drive is beautiful. You get out to our place, it's beautiful. It's stunning. It's old Florida. Everybody will say that. And now, I'm sure people are going to come out a few years from now when this is done, and I have duplexes 170 feet from my front yard, and I'm sure they're going to pull up and they're going to be like, how in the world did you get a cluster community duplexes across the street from where you live out in Alva? And I truly can't wrap my mind around how something like this could happen. It seems so wrong that you're taking Ag 2 property, 1 home per acre, now we're increasing the density 40%, cluster home, duplexes, 170 feet from us and bigger buffers everywhere else. It's hard for me to understand how this can all happen. And The only word I can say that comes to mind when I think about this is it's shameful. What's going on here is shameful. I mean, I know Neil's in the business of building homes and selling homes. My brother's in the same business. But in this case, you're also in the business of destroying communities, because this community is going to be destroyed. And I know the Cary family, they want to sell their property. People have their rights to property. I have no problem at all with somebody selling their property. The problem I have is when you're an advocate for increasing the density, why would you do that to the people of your community? You live out there. You understand what this is doing to the community. Why don't you just say 1 home per acre? This is the way it's going to be. Neil's already said that he'll do that. Why are we going through this battle when we really don't have to go through this battle? I think we can all be together with this thing. The Neil team, the presentation the other day was incredible. It really was. They can take anything and with a little spin and a little going through loopholes and stuff, they make you think like, well, this might be the best thing that ever happened out there. They do a great job. The staff is wonderful. I actually thought the staff was part of the Neil team until I found out later that no, they're Lee County employees. They're working well with the Lee team or with the Neil team. So it's kind of interesting. The traffic expert, it makes it sound like we're not going to have any traffic issues. 78 is going to be fine, and with the construction on 31, we're going to widen 31, and so there's not going to be any issues. Well, you are going to have to go south instead of going left. You're going to have to go right and go north and make a U-turn. Nevertheless, and he said there's funding in place. It's going to be there in 5 years. Well, then we hear information that there's no funding in place for this. So there's going to be a big problem with traffic, obviously. Everybody said it, and it's true. Everybody knows it's true. The environmental expert, wow, I hear him talk. He was amazing, too. They're all very amazing. The property right now as it sits is probably a wasteland. And really, it sounds like the Neil team's going to come in, and they're going to turn this into an environmental haven. It sounds like it's the best thing ever. It goes against logic that you're building 1,100 homes, and it's going to be the best thing for the environment out there. I don't know if I believe it or not, but it certainly sounds good. I didn't hear anything about pesticides or fertilizers. He might have talked about that. But, there are issues with that as well. Landscape guy, loved him too. Somehow, some way, they're going to make this development that's 170 feet away from my house or my front yard. They're going to make it vanish somehow with all this foliage they're going to put in it. I don't know, hopefully, I didn't hear anything about bamboo or areca's, but that's what you're going to need to hide this thing from me. And I don't know if those homes, I know there's a chance that they can be 35 feet tall, so I'm not sure if the duplexes, and I'm sure those are going to be duplexes because I don't think you're going to put the duplexes out, when you drive into the community. So the other day when you were asking them, they really weren't sure where they're going to go. I'm not an expert on this, but I'm pretty sure they're going to be right there on Duke Highway. So that's where they're going to be, and I'm not sure if they're going to be 35 feet tall either, so with my luck, they probably are. So just in closing, I'd just like to say this really is the way things work in a third world country. Down there, though, you have to bribe people to get people to do things. I'm sure we're not doing that here because I think I think these people are too smart to get caught up in something like that, but it's sad. It's very, very sad, and obviously the system is broken. Thank you. I really appreciate your time.
I do have a question.
Yes. I'm not an expert with anything, no. It's just all opinion.
Are you aware, you've talked about the fact that you like the AG2 regulation.
Yeah.
Do you know what the front footage setback is from road right-of-way in an AG2 district?
Probably 40 feet.
It's 25 feet.
Okay.
So the 170 feet, I'm not good at math, is somewhere near 100% increase over what you said you like.
Can I make one
Yes,
last comment?
but
I'm
we
glad
need
that you
to-
said that. Thank you. Because yes, 25 feet from the road, yes, please give that to me. I have one home on 1 acre, 25 feet from the road. Sold. I'll take that right now. Instead of a cluster of rows of homes 170 feet away. Absolutely. Can we make a deal right now? I'll definitely take that. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for coming today, sir, and your patience. The next card I have is for Richard Blake. He's not here? Okay, let me make a note of that. Okay, Duncan Brown. Is Duncan Brown here? No. Terry Lodge. Terry Lodge is not here. Nancy Hutto. Not here. Susan Allen.
Supposed to be a video, but can you help me, Dirk? Thank you. Did Darius do yeah. And then how do I, oh, there it is. And then when I'm done with, I think this is my presentation.
Thinking about it. Oh, there it is.
Is it Susan video?
Yeah, here we go.
There it is. Okay. And you can stop it and I'll introduce myself and then we can start it, okay?
Good morning.
Hello, thank you so much for your patience through this. I don't know how you do this job because anyway. My name is Susan Allen and I live at 14641 Duke Highway and I did receive the close proximity thing. First, I'm going to play a video for you.
Lee County Plan back in 1989 decided that this town called Alva should remain Lee County's sanctuary of rural living. Development can happen in Lee County, but not here. Here we go. This is Stacy Glenn. She lives in Alva. There are only two types of Alva residents. Those who've been planted here for generations, and those who purchased here, because this is exactly the life they were looking for.
I made a video about Alva, and a lot of my friends that I grew up with back home in Kansas said, that's just like Kansas. I grew up in a small town, everyone I knew around me, and it was a wonderful way to grow up, like feeling safe and having space and just knowing your neighbors and having roots.
And I grew up in a beautiful farm town in New Jersey called Scotch Plains. When we got there, it was a farm town, but one by one, farmers sold out, neighborhoods went up. It happened so gradually, it kind of crept up on us. Although it wasn't terrible, we looked around one day and realized we don't live in the same place anymore. The people here have such an attachment.
Yes.
Why? What are they holding on to?
They're holding on to the virginity of the land, the sanctity of the land, holding on to what it was. This is the last frontier of Lee County, for where you have 273 acre parcels of pasture land that are just grazing cattle in prime areas.
Back then in New Jersey, I don't think we had the foresight of seeing what happens in other towns. So I think we just kind of unknowingly let it happen. But in 1989, the writers of the Lee Plan had vision. And they said, we need to put in writing that this will all remain Alva.
My kids are happy here. The ability to be on 5 acres and have a ranger that they can just ride all over the property. They can just run around and have farm animals and do whatever they want.
In the last year or so, as the threat of redevelopment is now starting to become a reality, more and more of the people of Alva are becoming engaged with the process. And the Lee County Plan, and starting to hold the powers that be to some measure of accountability. They're saying this isn't the plan. Let's stick to the plan. We're all here based on the plan that you wrote.
Once upon a time, there was something called Lee Plan, where a bunch of people sat in a room and decided what Lee County was going to look like in the future.
The people of Alva love having a city close by. It's so many things they don't have. They love development.
And they dedicated Alva to being a sanctuary, a rural area that shall be preserved.
But they also know that the vision of the plan was exactly right, to keep Alva as a window into the past. With so many people moving to Florida, developers are clawing at this land. They're sitting on a fortune, but what the people of Alva see as a fortune, money can't buy. Their fortune isn't money. Their fortune is this kind of happiness. And if they sell, they've sold their happiness.
Everyone's holding on to that because that is their childhood and their memories of growing up in this area and driving by those winding pasture roads every single day. And they don't want it to change and become development. And I don't blame them.
This is Alva's moment. Right now is Alva's moment. All they really have to do is continue to come together and always say no. You see, the more things build up, the more things evolve from the way they used to be, the more novel and beautiful a life like this becomes. There was a time when this was novel and beautiful, but the more things become like this, the more this becomes novel, rare, beautiful, irreplaceable. Imagine that. They created their fortune by developing nothing.
Just genuine, good people that are your neighbors.
Good luck, people of Alva.
All of Southwest Florida used to look like this.
We'll see you next week. Guys, this is what?
I think it's the one right up there. It says Allen. That's it. Okay. Once again, my name is Susan Allen. I am the president of Alva Strong, and I live at 14641 Duke Highway. And it was presented on that video. It's a beautiful lane. The proposed development will definitely negatively affect myself and my neighbors. I have received the close proximity notice, and I am in complete agreement with those who have spoken in opposition to the zoning request. And I believe that the Lee County Comprehensive Plan has been spun to allow for increased density against the best interest of those who will live within the development and those who have lived in the neighboring communities for decades. My observation after listening to the Neal team is that if the houses are hidden behind shrubs, masqueraded as rural, no one will recognize that it is anything but rural. I call that lipstick on a pig. I don't believe that if you put up an entrance that looks rural, I don't know, maybe wagon wheels or hay bales, and you'll hide the 30-foot frontage lots and the duplexes and the 10 feet distance between houses. That's simply not rural. The Lee County plan calls for one house on 1 acre, and I don't think there's anybody in opposition to this situation that is against that. That's what we thought was going to come into our areas. When we moved here, we thought that this was a future plan. This was not like what we're going to do today, we're going to do something different in the future. This was the future plan. So when you buy here, there is an expectation that this is the kind of community. There are going to be 1,000 houses behind me. That's 3,000 people. Several other neighborhoods have been developed on the North River Road corridor and have been welcomed by our community because of their willingness to adhere to the Lee Plan in the acknowledgement that the acknowledgement of our rural nature. There's 3 developments that are newer developments, and they're beautiful. They're an acre plus, and they're gorgeous, and they fit in great. We have no problem with that. This builder would likewise be welcome if the rules were equally applied. The landowner simply picked the wrong builder for this property. It's a square peg in a round hole. The county should not be able to trim the edges to force the peg to fit. It simply doesn't fit. You have seen the map of Otter Creek. Otter Creek runs by my house and through my property, and we have major concerns for the water level, runoff, and pollution of the creek by fertilizers and potential construction waste. Construction waste mismanagement is also a concern, as I was notified as a leader of Alva Strong by a property owner from another Neal development under construction that reported that construction waste was being dumped in the retention ponds, and they had video of the cement truck rinsing their tanks into the storm drains. This whistleblower reported this to the FDA. As Otter Creek is a tidal creek and runs directly into the river, any future mismanagement is a major concern to me as a landowner and the public at large. This creek floods frequently as high tides, especially king tides, and I don't know what's going to happen with the runoff from this. It's very, very concerning. In addition, the community was only given 2 weeks' notice of this hearing with the staff report of 450 pages, giving us little time to prepare, take off work, and notify the community. Signs were rained out within several days of posting, and only a few remained to notify the public. Many more concerned citizens would have liked to have voiced their concerns, but due to work and other commitments and lack of early notice really prevented that, and I think that's important. Also, the fact that a Neal employee knocked on my neighbor's door on Tuesday asking why he was in opposition to this property is very troubling. This smacks of intimidation, and he dismissed this hearing as a done deal, discouraging his attendance. We do not know if he went to other neighbors' homes. And I will say, he's a few doors down from me. He has a long driveway. You cannot see his house from the road, and yet this gentleman went down and knocked on his door and intimidated him that he should not come to this meeting. Who else did he say that to? In addition, the community has been aware that the applicant has employed a lobbyist who is coincidentally the campaign manager for 4 out of the 5 commissioners, as well as contributing to all 5 commissioners. This just isn't a good look. And there just is an appearance of impropriety to the community, whether it's true or not, whether there's a problem or not. There is definitely an appearance, and we have felt as a group that our voices are not represented at all in any way. So to get to my main point here, I am a registered nurse, or was a registered nurse for 43 years. I served, including emergency and critical care and hospice nursing, as well as in education. Healthcare, public safety are critical concerns, and I believe that this is the most important aspect of this rezoning and the unbridled and exponential development happening throughout Lee County, and particularly our surrounding remaining rural areas. The numbers we have seen are attached to real people, daughters, sons, mothers, grandparents, all this data we've been seeing. People are not a dot on a map. We are talking about increasing the local population thrice, and that's approximately 3,000 people in one community, which is considered already medically underserved. Where we are with our population now is considered medically underserved. In addition, this community exits onto North River Road, which is a two-lane road which feeds into Route 31, which is already a very heavy construction traffic from Babcock Ranch, and has a very high vehicular fatality rate. A 19-year-old died just a few weeks ago on that road. This is a major, major public safety issue. And we're going to put 3,000 more people feeding onto that road. So now I would like to go to my presentation here. So unbridled development and healthcare consequences. Per your zoning staff report, we're supposed to preserve and promote the general intent of this code to protect public health, safety, and welfare, and that's what I want to address today. So I pulled these numbers up. This is population characteristics. We're talking about density. There's a reason we want to limit density, and there's multiple reasons. But when you see the difference, and here's Lee County, we're right now at this population, 822,453. In a 781 square mile radius. Now this number is going to be 1 million within 5 years, especially if we continue with this, because this is a huge problem. I don't know why our county seems to be hell-bent, on rapidly trying to get to 1 million. I'm not understanding. But look at our density here compared to Collier County and Charlotte County. So what are we going to do? We're going to gift a builder density, more density, for a property that he knew up front you couldn't build on the whole property. So he wants to be rewarded for what I think might have been a kind of not smart business decision by, we're going to give you or entitle you to more density. I think that's kind of scary. Increased density drives exponential population growth, and population growth increases demand for healthcare. This development will increase the density of North Olga and Northeast Lee County by about 46%. That is over 1,000 homes and about 3,000 people, which will be medically underserved, as I will show. Prolonged wait times in emergency rooms directly are affected by population growth. Lee County is one of the top 10 fastest growing counties in the nation. With that population explosion comes the need for more services to meet the growing needs of our new residents, in particular medical services. Keeping this up with our historically fast growing community needs has already been a priority and a challenge, and that's from Lee Health. So I want to speak, Lee County is medically underserved. It is considered critically medically underserved. Critical shortage of doctors and nurses, critical shortage of hospital beds, which I'll demonstrate, and demands on EMS response times at the current population, much less once we increase that population, especially in this kind of rural, kind of distant area where we don't have immediate medical services. We really are behind the 8 ball in this county on healthcare. So according to the Lee County staff report, Lee County EMS cannot yet sufficiently serve the entirety of the subject property area within the established response time at the current population. So let's add more, that's, uh-oh, what happened? Can you fix it?
Just opened up where the photo came from. Is that what you want to do?
Okay, there we go. See, what if your loved one was in this car and EMS said, can't arrive in the established response time threshold. As a nurse, there's a thing called the golden hour, and the golden hour is the time, it's that window of opportunity if somebody has a trauma that if you can get to them and get them to advanced medical care, that they have the best chance of survival. So when you have a delay in EMS services, especially in a rural area that's already taking them a while to get out there, you're really eating up that clock. So the benchmark for EMS services is 8 minutes and 59 seconds, 90% of the time. And that is the higher end of the degree of injury. So here is what our response times look like in Lee County. Not so good. This mark here is the 90%. The red are life-threatening, and the green are non-life-threatening events. And you can see that Lee County is well under that 90% most of the time. Per Lee County, Florida Department of Community Development Zoning Section staff report. During the review of this request, Lee County public staff advised that current EMS infrastructure is not able to respond to emergency calls at an acceptable level of service. Public Safety also noted that the site at Babcock is planned for development of a new facility which will correct the level of service at EMS. Given this existence of service deficiency, staff recommends a condition of approval to limit development until such time that appropriate level of service can be done. Now, this Babcock Ranch EMS is 5 years out and is probably still not going to be adequate when you look at the numbers even once it's built, because there are even ambulances that have been purchased by Lee County that don't have staff to run them now. So again, I think this limited development, I think this speaks to why are we manipulating the Lee plan to fit this particular applicant where up front they knew that this was a 1 acre per house situation. So if you're going to have a heart attack, you might want to wait 5 years to do it. Okay, critical nursing and physician shortage in Lee County. Over 30% of our population is over 65. These are people who need health care the most. The percentage of this demographic is also growing. Population growth is one of the greatest forces of change in the healthcare system, and threatens our ability to provide access to care for the people of our communities. Why are we adding 1,000 homes, 3,000 people, tripling our local population, in direct opposition to the well-thought-out community plan? Healthcare shortages are not just an inconvenience. It is life-threatening. So you talk about traffic, it's an inconvenience, but if you're trying to get an ambulance to you, and cardiac death or a brain death happens 6 minutes after cardiac arrest. And yet even the benchmark is 8 minutes and 59 seconds, which I showed on the graph we're not meeting. Now we're going to add more population. And it's almost like it's death through 1,000 cuts. This is just one community, a few more houses. But this is happening over and over, all over. This applicant has purchased land all around us. So we know kind of what's happening. The community's not stupid, we're watching. So this is death by 1,000 cuts. You just keep adding, and every time they apply, they want bonus density. They want more. But something's got to give. And unfortunately, it could be a child, a grandmother. Who's going to be the one that's going to be the sacrificial lamb because we didn't plan well? Okay, and as a nurse, this is an area that is near and dear to my heart. There is a nursing shortage in Lee County, and it is population driven. Unsafe nurse ratios, when you have an overabundance of demand, the supply side being nurses, if you're not dealing with the demand, You can keep pumping nurses in, you can keep pumping doctors in, you can do what you want, but not if you keep exponentially. And these nurses, since COVID, thank God I retired when I did. I don't, it just, the ratios these nurses have to deal with is unsafe. And let me tell you something, they're really pumping nurses out now to try to help with this shortage. There is nothing more dangerous than a new nurse. I was one, and I know that there is nothing more dangerous. So even though we're trying to get that supply up, these are not going to be experienced, seasoned nurses for quite a while. Aging nurse force, 20% are over 60. They're going to be tapping out. Florida nurses shortage is expected to reach 60,000 by 2035. And actually that shortage is higher in our specific area. Unbridled development, population-driven needs. That's what's really driving this. That is the demand side of this. I won't read all this. These are just news articles about the nursing shortage. You know, again, 60,000 nurses short by 2035. You can read this if you want. Oh. I did it again. You can tell I was a nurse and not a tech person.
Just keep on the black.
Oh, what do I do?
Keep clicking on the black area. It won't.
Oh, just click here?
Oh, yeah, use the mouse.
Okay.
Just keep it off the text.
Thank you. All right. Also, there's a doctor shortage. At present, Florida ranks 43rd nationally in the number of medical residents. Medical residents kind of stick to the area that they went to. Fourth most populous state in the nation, but we have a severe doctor shortage, especially in rural areas. Highest deficit is in Cape Coral, Lehigh, Alva, and Fort Myers. Lee County is short 273 adult primary care physicians and currently has a shortage that will climb to 625 doctors by 2025, the data shows. And now I want to stop a moment and I want to give you some anecdotal evidence of what this is. I have a best friend. She's been my best friend since I was 17 years old. We were roommates in nursing school together. 2.5 years ago, she had an adverse reaction to the COVID vaccine and ended up in the ICU with endocarditis, kidney failure, heart failure, and was on dialysis. After she was finally discharged, we flew, she and her mother, 95 years old, she was a sole caregiver of her mother, who recently passed about 4 weeks ago. She lived with us. For the last 2.5 years, we were helping the two of them. About a year ago, Kay was diagnosed with cancer. She had her hysterectomy. She was told, everything is fine, you're cancer-free. Her follow-up scan 6 months later showed multiple metastatic disease, multiple tumors throughout her belly, which were incurable. Her oncologist, or oncology surgeon, referred her to a medical oncologist. You want to guess how long it took her to get that appointment? 3 months, and it was in Tampa. 3 months. You want to know what her prognosis is? 4 to 14 months. 3 months wasted while she tried to get a doctor to see her. And the first doctor that saw her was a tele-visit because they didn't have any office hours. She called multiple oncologists. I got on the phone trying to get her in. When we say there's a shortage of doctors, this is not something abstract that's out there. This affects people today in our community. And we can't keep pumping people in. Again, you have to look at the demand side of this. The answer is not more doctors. The answer is more doctors and less population. So what do we do as a county? We keep approving. Density increase after density with a complicit commissioners who own property themselves that are trying to develop it. Second story. My husband has pneumonia from COVID. We got about a month ago. Took him to the ER last week before last. Tuesday morning, off season, 10:30 in the morning, we get there. Guess when we saw a doctor? 5 at night. And that's typical. I've been to that ER a couple of times with my friend. One time it was 8 hours, one time it was 12 hours to see a physician. This is common here. And we're not a third world country, but boy, it sure looks like one. We have to deal with the demand side of this issue. Okay, so talked about hospital or nurse shortage, EMS, prolonged response times, physician shortage. Now I'm going to talk about hospital bed availability. This is the number of hospital beds per 1,000 people. You can see we're below the state. Primary care physicians, we're below the state. 0.66% of public safety professionals per population, averages 0.82. Okay. I know this is hard to see, but I spent a long time on this last night trying to make sure you could kind of see this. Now, we have several hospitals. Most people in my area go to Gulf Coast because it is, they have more services. If you look at this line right here, this is the number of a percentage of occupancy of hospital beds, and this is the ICU percentage. The safe number is this right here, 85%. A hospital should never be occupied more than 85% to ensure safety of the people. ICU should be between 70 and 75%. All of these numbers in red are over 90, and some of them are like 97%. At Lee Memorial, one day they hit 111.3% bed occupancy. So people were in the halls. Yeah. And again, this is about a year's worth, so you can go back. I wanted to capture the full year so you can see in season, out season. Really doesn't seem to matter. It's almost all over 90%. And I'm not talking low 90s either. We're talking 95, 90, it's up there. So that's scary. As a nurse, that's scary. I tell you right now, I would not want to work at that hospital. I would not do it because the patient ratio is just whacked. The other thing that's super, super important, especially after Ian, is evacuation times. Again, when you look at this particular property, you're going out onto North River Road, which is a 2-lane road. Right now, on any given day, you're going to sit through the cycle of a light, especially in the morning, sometimes 2-3 times. So, and we're going to triple. Now we're going to triple the population. So if you have an evacuation event right now, it takes 41 hours to leave the county and 89 to get out of Southwest Florida. High-density housing, exponential population growth in Lee County only add to the stress on emergency services and put people at risk. Again, these are not just numbers. All of these are people. They're your pets, that you're trying to get out. It's scary. It's scary. And this is just for a little humor. We can't keep feeding them because you know what happens when you keep feeding them. Something's going to explode. And I have a comment about, Miami is the second worst city to retire in the nation due to traffic. At build out, we will be Broward County. And that comment came from Frank Meehan, former commissioner. He saw it coming, and I wish he were still here. He saw it coming. We can't keep feeding it. We can't keep feeding this. And so I implore you to request that this applicant follow the same rules that North River or Riverwind Cove and the other communities along our road did. We can't take it. And it sounds, there's been a lot about rural and things. And that's super, super important. But public safety is, there's just nothing more important than that. And I think it's been ignored. I just implore you to do the right thing here. I really do. Because there's some kid that's going to get killed out on 31 like happened a few weeks ago. And it's not going to stop. And the more we add to it, with the construction at Babcock Ranch. Those trucks go flying through there. We don't need any more of it. We just don't. And I thank you so much for listening. And I pray that you act on it as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for coming today. Okay, it is 12:10, so we are going to break for lunch. We'll do 1 hour and we'll resume back at 1:15, and we'll pick back up with the comment cards in the order that I have them. If you need them in a particular order, please let staff know so that they can alter the order. Otherwise, as I said, I'll continue until we finish. Thank you.